Hi, my name is Kevin, and I work in high-tech product management. I recently completed the Google UX Design Professional Certificate, and in this video I'll provide a summary of the course, including who it's intended for, how long it takes and how much it costs, and an overview of the course material. I'll explain the core concepts through a worked example from a project I did as part of the program. By the end of the video, you'll have a good understanding of the course, and you'll be able to decide whether it's something that's relevant for you. The Google UX Design Professional Certificate is primarily targeting people interested in UX as a career. It's intended to provide foundational training in core principles, processes, and tools to someone with no background in UX design. That said, the material is highly relevant to anyone currently working in or trying to break into the broad area of high-tech new product design and development. So let's dive in. Here's an overview of some key aspects of the program. The training is fully online through Coursera. There are 7 courses, and Google estimates it takes around 6 months to complete, based on 10 hours a week. This is about how long it took me to complete the course. In the United States, the course costs $39 per month, and so the average person will spend around $300 completing the course over 6 months. The material is a mix of videos, quizzes, readings, and homework. All work is done individually, although there are optional discussion boards for specific topics that the community posts to. The majority of the homework centers on designing 2 apps and 2 websites over the course of the program. The course covers foundational UX design concepts. The core concept covered is user-centered design. Google uses the 5-phase design thinking process as the backbone of the course. This is a design process popularized by the D School at Stanford University and others. The course goes through each of the phases and explains the theory and related practical tools. Then, participants go through the full process, first to design an app, then to design a website, and finally to design a cross-platform app and website. There's a strong focus on user research throughout the course, and participants design and conduct user research several times. Biases and how to identify and account for them are covered, especially as it relates to user research. Several visual design principles are explained and applied, including Gestalt principles and the principles of emphasis, hierarchy, scale, proportion, unity, and variety. Other common themes throughout the course are accessibility, where the needs of people with disabilities are specifically considered, and equity-focused design, where the needs of groups that have been underrepresented or ignored in the past are addressed, and how accessibility and equity-focused designs benefit all users and the business. There is a strong focus on the practical in the course. Participants use 2 popular software design tools, Figma and Adobe XD, as part of the course to create wireframes, prototypes, and designs for mobile apps and websites. By the end of the course, participants will have empathized with users to understand their needs and followed the design process to design 2 mobile apps and 2 websites. In doing so, they will gain practical experience and build a portfolio to show prospective employers. The certificate program consists of 7 courses. The courses are taken serially from 1 through 7. The 7 courses break down into 4 sections, although they're not grouped like this in Coursera. Course number 1 makes up the first section. This course provides an overview of user experience, UX-related roles in the workplace, and foundational concepts such as user-centered design and the design process. Section 2 is made up of courses 2 through 5, and these 4 courses are where most of the core concepts are covered. The 5 phases of the design process are explained, along with related practical tools, and participants put theory to practice by designing a mobile app. Course 6 is the third section. Here, participants go through the design process for a second time and design a responsive website to accompany the mobile app they designed in the prior section. The final section is Course 7. Participants go through the full design process again and design a cross-platform mobile and web experience for social good. This course also prepares participants for applying for UX jobs and includes creating a resume and online portfolio. Let's take a closer look at the user-centered design process, since this is the foundational concept that underpins the certificate and drives much of the practical work for participants. As mentioned, the design process leverages design thinking, which is a way to create solutions that address a real user's needs. Although the process is shown as having 5 phases, in reality, the process is non-linear and highly iterative. Core to the process is observing, with empathy, how real users interact with their environment. The program is heavily skewed towards the practical. Participants are given just enough theory and then work on assignments to put that theory into practice. Google does this by providing participants with several hands-on tools for each phase. The 5 phases of the design process are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Let's go through the 5 phases of the design process for one of the projects I worked on for the course so you can get an idea of what's involved. The project I worked on for the capstone course 7 of the program was to design a tool to help people register to vote. During the first phase of the design process, participants conduct user research to gain an understanding of the problems their target users face. The project I worked on was to design a tool to help people register to vote. I started by thinking about different groups of voters that might have similar needs so I could narrow the focus of the project. In other words, by segmenting the market. I decided to focus on voters in the USA. Some potential market or voter segments might include immigrants who recently became citizens, college students, retirees, adults who recently moved to a new state, and others. I came up with evaluation criteria to determine which segment to focus on. The criteria I used were the potential impact a solution might have and the ability to find and engage the segment. I chose to focus on college students since they're typically younger, and so supporting them in registering to vote would pay dividends for many years to come, and also because they're a sizable group that is relatively easy to find and engage. I conducted the foundational user research for the project during the COVID pandemic through online video interviews. I found users by doing targeted advertising on Facebook and asking users to complete a screener survey. I selected respondents that were still in college, that had registered to vote in the past 2 years, and indicated that they found the process challenging. I interviewed a number of students with a mix of people from different states, those going to college in-state versus out-of-state, age, and gender.
I go to school in Binghamton University.
With interviewees' consent, I recorded the interviews and created transcripts of the interviews. For each interviewee, I created an empathy map to document what each does, says, thinks, and feels relative to voter registration. I grouped people with similar needs and created a persona for each group. A persona is a fictional user whose needs represent those of a larger group of users. I identified 2 groups of users represented by 2 personas. Rosie, a busy, full-time, in-state undergraduate college student that wants a convenient way to check if they're registered, and if they're not, a way to find out what documents they need to register and where they can register online and in person. Goyo, an out-of-state part-time student who, amongst other goals, would like a way to be reminded of upcoming elections, as well as key deadlines, including the deadline for registering to vote, so that they don't miss the election in their home state. Leveraging the personas, I then created user stories to articulate what that user hopes will happen and why. A user story is a one-sentence story told from the persona's point of view to inspire and inform design decisions. Here's an example user story from Goyo. As an out-of-state graduate student, I want to be reminded of upcoming elections so that I can check if I'm registered to vote in the correct voting district. I also created a user journey map to illustrate what the user currently goes through to achieve their goals and to start to identify opportunities for improvement. The empathize phase and the related tools work to keep the design focused on users and their needs. Having spent time empathizing with users and understanding their needs, the next phase of the design process is to define the user problem or problems to solve for. In my user research, I identified 5 user stories. I listed them in a table and identified criteria to evaluate and prioritize the user stories. The pain point that ranked highest was the need for voters to be reminded of upcoming elections so that they can verify they're registered before the deadline and note when to vote. I wrote a problem statement to clearly describe this user need for Goyo, the archetypal target user. And I wrote a hypothesis statement to document my best guess at what the solution to the problem might be, informed by everything I learned from the user research so far. In the next phase, I ideated potential solutions to the user's problem. Many ideation techniques exist, and the course identifies several and goes deep on a few. For this exercise, I leveraged two ideation techniques. I started by doing a competitive audit to examine alternative ways of solving the user's needs and the strengths and weaknesses of each across a number of UX areas, including the user interaction, visual design, and content. Next, I did a crazy eights exercise to rapidly create 8 potential solutions to the problem statement in 8 minutes. Having identified a potential solution, it's now time to move to the prototype phase. To narrow the focus of the scope for the design of the web app and website, which I called Remind Me to Vote, I created a goal statement to summarize the product and its benefits for the user. I defined a user flow to figure out how to have users move through the app effectively before spending a lot of time on the actual app design itself, and a storyboard to visually outline the ideal user flow. I started to explore different ways to structure the web app information using paper wireframes, and ultimately narrowed the design down to a single paper wireframe. A wireframe is a basic outline of a digital experience that's made up of lines and simple shapes. I created the wireframes first in paper and then in digital form in Figma once the structure was becoming clearer. I then created a digital low-fidelity prototype for the product based on the wireframe to allow basic interaction with the product. With the early prototype created, I then went back to target users and tested the prototype in the final test phase. I created a research study plan that identified the research goals, the research questions, KPIs to measure success, and details about the research methodology, the participants, and the interview script. I arranged for 9 college students to evaluate the app. The participants were a mix of male, female, and non-binary individuals attending college both in-state and out-of-state. 2 participants were users of assistive technologies. The methodology was an unmoderated usability study where participants followed a set of instructions and answered questions about the app.
15 days before election, by mail, postmark 15 days before election, that's all set. I like that. The only thing I would add is a link to maybe
I used an affinity diagram to synthesize and organize the results of the usability testing and drew insights into how the product could be improved to better meet the user's needs. For example, one insight was that users need a way to change the number of days before the deadline to receive a reminder. This was fixed at 14 days in the original version. I updated the design based on this feedback and created a high-fidelity prototype, which I then tested again with actual users and did another round of updates based on the user feedback. And there you have it. In the course, participants go through the design process multiple times and work on the definition and design of 2 apps and 2 websites. Participants also create an online portfolio that can be used during their job search. Overall, I found the course to be very worthwhile. The content is really high quality and it's a bargain for the cost. Google has done a really good job at keeping the material engaging, and I really like the fact that there's a strong focus on doing rather than passive learning. I would recommend the course to anyone that's trying to break into the world of high-tech UX and anyone that works in a related field such as product management that wants to learn more about user-centered design. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found the video useful.